Welcome to the Skirted Professional Podcast, a place where women of all different walks of life come together to share their journeys and wisdom they've learned along the way. We're so excited that you're part of this community. We hope you always leave this space feeling encouraged, inspired, and a little less alone. The Skirted Professional is brought to you by C Saucy, a medical apparel company that specializes in modern scrub skirt sets for the working woman. Their goal is to give every woman the option to wear a skirt in their workplace without compromising the comfort, style, or functionality of their scrubs. You can check them out at csaucy.com. That's CSAUCY.com. All right, without further ado, let's get to today's episode. Hi, Nicole. Welcome to the Skirted Professional Podcast.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, we are so excited to get to know more about you today and all of the areas that you're juggling. So let's dive right in. Why don't you give us a snippet of your background and kind of who Nicole Soto is today?
Sure. Yeah. My name's Nicole Soto. I have a bachelor's of science in marketing from the School of Business Administration, and I've always kind of been a little bit of a nerd growing up. I always was super into grades and got into writing pretty early on, and that kind of was my thing because I wasn't really a math person. But did struggle through a lot of math classes through college and made it. So that's exciting. But yeah, since then, I now work at a nonprofit. I'm a project manager, and before the role that I have currently, I was what was I? I'm trying to remember my last title. Sponsorship specialist, basically. And the company that I work for produces really large scale events. Sometimes 30,000 people at this event, and we produce all aspects of that event. So recently, I kind of work more in events, and then I work doing a lot of digital marketing, and so that's kind of where the project management part comes in. So that's a little bit about
Wow.
my work background.
Yeah. So what about your personal life? Kind of give us some background there too.
Yeah. So I have been married for 4 years in August. Um, Blake is my soulmate, and he is my person, and I'm super grateful for him. He keeps me calm. I always say that I keep him really organized, and he keeps me calm. Um, we serve at our church in a variety of different areas. We serve as the P7 and CMI coordinators for our state, and just do whatever is at hand that God is wanting us to do at the moment. Um, I'm an author, so I wrote a book. I believe this year is 5 years in June or July. It's
Wow.
5 years that I published Worth It, and that's been a really interesting journey in and of itself. I've always been into writing, but really felt God place on my heart to write a book right as I was about to graduate college. And the book is really just about dealing with self-worth for young women from a biblical perspective. And through that, God's opened a lot of really cool doors, and just been able to speak to a lot of different women from different age groups and demographics. And yeah, I've really
Very
enjoyed that piece of the journey for sure.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you have a lot going on.
Say that, yeah.
So full-time job in the let's secular setting, I would say.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
now you're putting on these massive events. You're creating digital flyers, digital marketing for it. Do you actually get to attend these events as well?
I do, yeah. I go to 3 or 4 a year. So yeah, so traveling 3 or 4 weeks out of the year, not crazy, but yeah, those are long days and long weeks, but they're really cool.
I'm sure it's very rewarding to see your work and all the hours spent on it come to life in a
It
large
really
scale
is.
setting. Yeah. So cool. All right. So let's dive into your book. And I know you kind of gave us a snippet about it, but
Mhm.
you know, at the end of your college journey, when you said God started laying that on your heart, were you yourself dealing with self worth and kind of navigated those emotions and like what am I looking for? Did you develop a skill set on how to get your mind and get your soul out of that mode whenever you were feeling down? What was it birthed out of your own journey?
Absolutely. Yeah. I really worth it started because I'd always kind of wanted to write a book. I started a blog when I was 17, and it was kind of when blogs were just starting. It wasn't like, for a while everybody had a blog, and this was kind of prior to that. So I kind of started a blog when it wasn't cool and people would make fun of me for it and just, this is so dumb, whatever. And then everybody started a blog. So it was kind of like, okay, I see where we're going with this. But through that, I kind of gained a lot of traction like my senior year, and I pretty much just wrote about really vulnerable topics. And it started off kind of as a fashion blog, and I kind of just felt that God wanted more from me and was really placing more, I don't want to use the word heavy, but just more substantial topics on my heart. And so from that, the blog really grew, and I really had a desire in my heart to write a book. So I started writing a manuscript, and I was kind of midway through college at this point. And one day, God was just like, scrap it. Like, just this is not it. And so I had about half of a manuscript done, and I just felt like I was supposed to completely redo it. And it was just a really strong feeling. And right after that, I went into this season where just a lot of different things happened in my life, and I just felt completely worthless and just so void of just purpose. And I was just going through a lot of different things all at once. And it really was God using, that season in my life to write this book where I'd have, firsthand experience of exactly the topics that the book, deals with. So through that kind of season, I wrote Worth It, and Worth It was birthed out of a lot of my kind of heartbreak and how to deal with that and how I kind of navigated that and what God spoke to me through those times. And so, yeah,
Wow.
that's pretty much like the story. And, if God tells you to throw away your manuscript, you just do it, I guess.
Wow. So when you say throw it away, I mean, is it saved somewhere to where if you felt like it would come back to life one day, you have it? Or, I mean, it was gone?
I don't even think I have a copy of it. Maybe it's on a previous computer, but I don't think it's on the Mac that I have currently.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it was
What
just,
what faith that took?
it really was. It was really scary. And then at the end, when I was about to publish, like the week before I was publishing Worth It, I was so nervous. I'm like, I'm too young to be writing this. Like, I'm just about to graduate college. I don't have enough experience for this. And I was just thinking about throwing it away again. But that was when God was like, no, you need to do this. You need to push through it.
Wow. So did you have a mentor that kind of guided you through that process? Because for someone who's never done that before, even on the writing scene, that could seem like an overwhelming process. So did you have someone that had done it before that kind of guided you through it?
Well, my dad's grandfather, so my great grandfather was a writer, and he passed away maybe 20 years ago, and his books still sell every day. He wrote 11 books. So it's kind of in my blood. And then my dad is also an author. So he helped me a lot. We did a lot of like, the publishing process together, and he helped me navigate a lot of that. And then my life mentor happens to be an English professor. And so I hired her basically to do all of the editing and the proofreading. She was just incredible and really helped me with the outline and helped me kind of really pinpoint exactly what I wanted to touch on in which sections of the book. And then my friend Steven, he's publishing his third or fourth book this week. This book is like 500 pages. He's ridiculous on church history. He's just amazing. He
Oh my
edited
word.
everything for biblical accuracy. So that gave me a lot of peace of mind.
Sure. Wow. What
So I
great
had a
people
lot of
you.
help.
Yeah. Well, I could see how that is a not a one person job. Like that's a
No,
lot.
it takes a village. It really does.
Yeah. So, in that process of writing, I have the standpoint of producing a product that I've designed, which is a very vulnerable state.
Mhm.
And most recently, my company released a whole new line. And the week of that line, my husband would tell you I was just on edge. I was so just nervous and just felt like I'm in such a vulnerable place. Like I'm about to open
Yes.
myself up for critique and, positive, negative comments, all of the above. And so I can imagine with a book and writing something, especially that you have gone through, is a very vulnerable place to be. So, kind
Absolutely.
of give us insight while writing this book, the lessons God was teaching you and I'm assuming the deep God moments you had to have where He breathed more inspiration into you and maybe He gave you the words to write. I would love to hear about that process.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, every single chapter was something that, a subject that I had to deal with, I had to work through. Um, and even reading it back, I think sometimes when I was writing it, I worried, okay, in 5 years, am I going to read this and be like, oh my word, I can't believe I published this? And I still feel like, obviously there's always things that could be improved upon, but I still feel like, okay, the heart of what I was supposed to say was right for that time, like the message that I was supposed to portray to, the audience that God intended, that's still there. And I'm still, thankful that, he gave me the words to say in that moment. But yeah, I had to really be just crazy vulnerable because there's a lot about me being, not a lot, but I touched on being a pastor's daughter and my parents being, home missionaries and just kind of the kind of life that that entails. And it definitely brings you to a very vulnerable place where you are, like you said, totally opening yourself to critique and to people having opinions and, knowing this completely other maybe side to your life that maybe you wouldn't talk about normally. But um, I think that it was just, like you said, it was a God breathed inspiration book because I never probably would have put myself out there had I, not had those moments where God was like, no, this is exactly what I want you to do.
Wow. Very inspiring. So, for the girl maybe listening or the lady listening to this who feels like God is nudging them to write a book or to put themselves out there, what would you say to them?
I would say, you have to do what it is that God is asking you to do in that moment. And I think God asks you to do certain things in every season, and that's what I've learned. I'm going through a really interesting journey. I'm calling it my journey season right now. There's a lot of just prayers that we've prayed that we're kind of waiting on, and um, God is requiring something different from me than He was in that season. And it's not that um, one season is less challenging than the other, but it's a different kind of challenging. And so I would just say, whatever season you're in and whatever God is asking and requiring you to do in that season, just, say yes and, let yourself, succumb to the process that God has placed in front of you, which is much easier said than done. Trust me.
It is. And, thankfully, which you're in the middle of it right now, like you said, your journey season. But regarding your book, you're on the other side of it now. So you've seen
Yes.
the, if success is the word we want to tag to this, because it was a mission project, but
Mhm.
you want it to be well received. So I do think success is applicable in this situation, but you've seen the positive feedback. You've probably had the stories come in, but I can absolutely empathize, sympathize with someone who's in that stage that can't see that ending process yet and is still just very, very insecure about putting themselves out there. So I think you've given really great advice for that season that they're in right now.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, okay, we've heard the Nicole Soto, who is an author, who is a wife. You touched on being a pastor's daughter. So, I would
Yeah.
love to hear more about your childhood and growing up in a pastor's home. You said they were home missions pastors. So, that is a whole new realm of things for us to dive into. So, yeah, give us some background on what it was like growing up in the home that you grew up in.
Yeah. So I think when you're, a child of church planters versus maybe an established church, it's a very different life. my father-in-law has coined the term privilege and price in terms of being in ministry and living a lot of times as a PK. There's this privilege and this price side, and Blake, my husband, and I have really kind of dove into that and are gonna kind of do a lot more with that topic in the future. But there is this double sided coin of sometimes you get to have really incredible moments and experiences, and you're, living on the mountaintop, and there's this privileged side that's this blessing that comes with ministry and being raised in a pastor's home. And then there's this side of it's a lot of sacrifice, and it's a lot of, um, giving things up for a greater good, and for the kingdom, and for this purpose and this burden that your parents have a lot of times before you even have a burden yourself. And it's a really different life, and I'm 100% convinced that I would be a completely different person if I was not, you know if I did not grow up in a pastor's home, I would be a completely different person. And so I think in a lot of ways it's shaped me for the better. I had more of the price side growing up because my parents started a church from a Bible study. So, you know, growing up, things weren't, I had an amazing, beautiful childhood, but it wasn't like things were easy or things were handed to me or financially things were easy. And so I think that's just, it shaped me a lot. And, for somebody who's maybe dealing with that side, just know that there are so many, things that are birthed in your character during those years that it's just a completely different life. Like my husband and I are both, pastors' kids, and we had very different upbringings and very different challenges and struggles. And, there's good and bad to both. And I think that it really does shape your character in more ways than you'll realize until you really develop your own calling, and, God gives you your own burden. Then you'll have, those things that come out that you're like, "Oh, that's why I had to go through that." And now, okay, that connects to that, It just kinda all
Yeah.
comes to light.
Yeah, I love that. And it sounds like in your specific scenario, you said you had a lot of the price, growing up. But now, through your character and through those experiences, you're reaping the privilege of paying that price growing up. And you're reaping it in maybe disciplines and habits that you formed when it was just you, or it was just you volunteering, maybe you and your siblings
Mhm.
running every portion of the service.
Yeah.
But what an opportunity to grow. And it sounds like the privilege side has manifested later in life.
No, that's a good point, and I think sometimes the privileges aren't always, like, financial privileges or this kind of privilege, but how you touched on the disciplines that it creates in you is so true. You just I don't know, you have these things in you where you're like, your work ethic is crazy because it has to be, because like you said, you're running everything from since you're a child. So I think that to me is one of the best things is, learning delayed gratification, learning how important that a work ethic is, learning people over everything else. So I think those are some of the things that have been huge for me later in
Yeah,
life that I've benefited from those lessons.
sure. Yeah. And it's like, maybe things were stripped down to the bare minimum growing up through that season. But now as you experience more of the privilege, you get to choose what is added, whether it's materialistic, whether it's manifests itself in different ways, you're 100% in control because you can live at the bare minimum. You've done it before.
Yeah,
So
that's a good
figuring
point.
out what privilege you want to add, it gets to
Mhm.
shape your life and your future family and your marriage. And I think that's really, really a great topic.
Yeah, that's so true. I think that's probably why Dave Ramsey it wasn't easy for me, but I think that's why I kind of like dove into it because I'm like just so used to delayed gratification. I was like, what's another 3 years of this craziness?
Well, it's funny you bring that up because I was just thinking I follow you on social media, so we've connected that way a few times. And for
Yeah.
everyone listening, before we started recording, we were discovering that our husbands are somehow distant cousins, and we don't quite
Yes.
know yet, but we're gonna make that
We're gonna
connection.
figure it out.
We're gonna figure it out. But from us being connected, we both have gone through the Dave Ramsey debt-free program. And let's talk about that because I feel like
Let's
that is
talk
not
about it.
as widely talked about among newlyweds, among young marrieds. We also make 4 years in May, so we're right neck and neck with each other.
Okay.
And I have to say that we dove into Dave Ramsey 6 months after being married.
Mhm.
And I come from a life of probably not as much delayed gratification as my husband did. And so it was quite the journey for us to, number one, get on the same page, which was the best thing we could have done 6 months down the road. But yeah, let's talk about this getting debt free and the concept of living below your means to some extent
Yes.
to
Yes.
prepare for our future.
No, I could talk about Dave Ramsey all day long, and at our church, I'm going to teach the life group in the fall, and I'm just so excited about it because I'm trying to get. I have a my husband's brother is much younger than him, and so all his friends are like going into college and everything, and I'm trying to get all of them in this class because I'm like everybody needs to be on Dave Ramsey. We all need to be on the
Yes.
same page. Like,
Exactly. And while we're on that topic, my husband and I first went through the class at church. It was offered
okay,
on a Wednesday night. So we had like breakout sessions and you could choose which one you wanted to go to. So I want to put a plug in to anyone listening right now that if your church has the capability and you have someone to teach that type of class, it's not only good for your saints, but it's also a community outreach
yes.
tool. You can promote it to your community. And it was a life changing journey for us.
I loved it. I feel like I we learned so much on that journey, like you were saying, just being on the same page. And so now that, my husband runs his own business and that's his full-time job, that that is, I say my husband, we both do. I mean, I do more of the back end of it, but it is his business technically. But yeah, I mean, it has been huge for us to be able to take that step of faith for that to become his full-time job because we did Dave Ramsey before, and so it creates those disciplines and those habits, and you never start a business in debt and all those things that benefit you later in life.
And it's so funny because it was grueling during the process. I remember there were several times where I just was like, this is ridiculous. Why are we doing this? Like, we can afford more, just all
Yeah.
the things that come up along the journey. But now to reap the benefits of having I say so much money to us, it is a lot, it's a substantial amount
Yeah.
of money freed up every month that is not tied in to a monthly payment or a car note
Mhm.
or something of that nature. It has afforded us awesome trips. And like your husband is full time with his business, we didn't fear whenever I felt God calling me to step away from nursing and go into see Saucy full time. We didn't
That's
fear because we
amazing.
had set ourselves up in a way that we were going to be okay. And we were just living within our means, if not a little
Mhm.
bit below.
Yep.
And I can't express enough the benefit it had on us as a young married couple and starting our lives off, I feel, in a positive direction. So give us insight into how you and Blake handled it and maybe different personalities. Did you have budget meetings like we did where you would sit down and reevaluate everything?
Yeah, I first want to know how rice and beans did you get? Like how into it? Some people are really like, yeah, we really had rice and beans, and I'm like, that's a little much.
No, we didn't have rice and beans, but
We
what
didn't.
was just like I could just go buy groceries. It was now I have a monthly budget. And
Yes.
but Nicole, what was so crazy is I had never really operated off of a budget before. My parents did, obviously. My dad was self-employed my whole life, so times were different. Every month was kind of different, and there was really, really
Mm,
good times, and then there were some lean times. But I graduated nursing school and I was a single nurse. So it was just not anything I was thinking about until I got married and then things change. Um, so the topic of budgeting, what I found, and Dave Ramsey's daughter really says it, is it gave me
mm.
liberty and freedom to spend every dime that we had budgeted for that category. And I have to say
Mhm.
that is what I enjoyed the most about it was if we had budgeted X amount for groceries, if I spent it all, great. If not, it carried over to the next month, but I didn't have to stress about am I overspending. It just gave me that
Right.
freedom to do it. So,
That's
rice and
good.
beans, no, but definitely a strict amount for each category.
Okay. Yep, same here. I wouldn't say I think sometimes it's people can get really, really stringent on it and like you're not some people do never go out to eat for 3 years and kudos to them, that's amazing. But for us it was more like, once a week versus like, I was cooking every night and meal prepping and, like the whole thing. So, yeah, so we basically started, I want to say we started in October and we got married in beginning of August. So maybe like 3 or 4 months in. So pretty early on. I feel like we had our honeymoon and then we were kind of like just not like spending crazy, but just not really on a crazy budget. And then in October, I was like, okay, we need to do this. And I had kind of been interested in Dave Ramsey. I took it in high school, and so did he, which is really odd because I went to Christian school and he went to just a normal secular high school, and he had it his senior year, which is really odd, kind of.
Yeah, yeah.
So we both were kind of like familiar with it. We both, loved the idea of it. Obviously, doing it is a different thing. But then in October, we went ahead and paid off his car, which was just like a couple thousand. It wasn't anything crazy that he had left. And then we tackled my student loans, which was, that was it. That was the only other debt that we had. But it was, not substantial. Like some people have like $100,000, but to us, it was a lot. And so for the next year and a half, we did that. And I actually just remembered this the other day, but we drove one car for like a year. And I totally forgot about that until like a couple days ago. But yeah, we worked in the same skyscraper. I worked on 20 and he worked on the second floor. And
Oh,
so we
cool.
drive to work together, which was totally a God thing that we were even able to drive to work together, honestly. But
Yeah.
yeah, so we sold one of our cars and paid off the other one and worked to pay off the student loans. And then we cash flowed a Jeep, a 2016 Jeep during that process. So that was a whole other thing. And then yeah, then we just kept going with the baby steps and it's just completely changed our lives in every way. Like I'm so thankful that we did it and I will be forcing our children to do it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Whether they
Same
like it
for
or
our
not, they're going to have the envelopes.
college tuition.
Yeah, seriously.
It's funny you talk about envelopes. We still have envelopes actually
Oh,
hidden
you
in a drawer
do?
in our house. I'm telling all of our secrets.
Wow.
But yeah, there are still certain categories like our travel fund because
Okay.
it truly does get lost in the mix up. If you just say, well, we have this month, this X amount, designated to this category, month to month, it kind of gets lost. I don't know how it happens, but
That's a
it
good
does.
point. Yeah.
So I will actually go and pull that out of the bank and put it in that folder so it is just 100% there and we don't have to worry about it.
I need
Um,
to do that. I don't do that with travel, and you're right, it does get lost.
it does because then it's time to book stuff and you're freaking out because you thought you had so much, ready to go and you don't.
Hmm,
Um,
I like that. I'm gonna steal that from you.
do it, do it. I even had like someone had given us the Dave Ramsey envelope holder. I don't know. It's like a blue book and it has 5 or 6 envelopes in it. So
Mhm.
instead of me pulling out my envelope in the store, I'd pull out like kind of this blue billfold looking thing to pay cash for everything. But
That's
so
awesome.
it was quite the journey, but I love that it's changed y'all's life as well and has probably set
Yes.
you up to have kids in the future and be comfortable starting a
Yes.
family. But still, our goal was we want to have kids, yes, but we also want to bring them on trips with us and we want to
Yes.
have all these experiences and just working and not planning honestly would not allow us to do that.
You're so right. And I think it's a very like future thinking mindset because I mean, I just naturally think about things really in advance anyways. But for us, it's like we wanted to have a certain amount on a house down. We wanted to have a house before we started a family, and it's not like you can't do it the other way. It's just more difficult.
It
And
is.
and there are people who totally do it, and it's an amazing story, but it's just more difficult. And we're like, why don't we just start off our marriage doing this, you know,
Yeah.
and just kind of think really far out. Like you said, like we want to take our kids on trips, and traveling is really important to us, and be able to give them those experiences without worrying, are we going to be able to pay the mortgage or whatever.
Right. And also just not putting everything on a credit card, being able to
Right.
pay for that trip or that experience all up front. Like you just know
Yes.
it's taken care of. And then you come home and it's not stressful because you did what you needed to do years in advance to help fund it.
Yes.
And
And
yeah,
being
so
able
that
to truly enjoy the moment because you're not worried, you already have it paid for.
right. Oh,
And you
it's a game.
enjoy, like, our car, we enjoy so much more. We always talk about that, like our Jeep. We're like, the fact that we don't pay anything for this, and we don't even, I mean, we pay for an oil change and like gas, but
Right.
just the fact that we can actually enjoy this vehicle and not, throw hundreds of dollars away every month is such a
Right.
blessing. Or being able to enjoy the trip while you're traveling because you're not worried about the credit card bills when you come back.
That's exactly right. So true. Well, I'm glad we got off on that. So for anyone listening, if you're wondering if you're too far in debt or too far gone, you're not.
You're not.
Start a class at your church, start a class at your community center. It absolutely will change your life. So Nicole, as we're wrapping things up, I want to know, are you planning to write any more books?
I am actually. I had a book that I was kind of like mentally toying around with. And then I feel like recently God's been like, nope, you're actually going to write something completely different. That one's kind of on the back burner.
Wow.
So yeah, I have all of the chapter topics. That's about as
Awesome.
far as I've got so far. That is a little bit of like half the battle though, is kind of knowing what you're going to write about. So
Yeah.
very, very beginning stages, but yeah, I'm excited about it. I haven't
Yay.
If I'm not writing for a project, I don't really write, which is probably a terrible thing, but a lot of writers are kind of like that. Like I don't
Yeah, sure.
If I'm not super inspired, I don't write a lot. Just
Yeah.
I don't know. I read a lot when I'm not writing.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm excited to kind of like get back into it and,
That's
start
great.
that journey again.
Yeah, well, we're excited to read anything else that you produce. And we're definitely going to tag Worth It. And when this episode goes live, so that anyone listening to this, you've kind of met your author and heard her background story. So it would be in your best interest to grab a copy of this and even share it with your youth group, other ladies in your church or community. I think they would be really inspired by that. Nicole, we end every podcast episode with one question that we've kind of coined for the Skirted Professional. And we just want you to answer honestly and with the first thing that comes to your mind. Are
Okay.
you ready? Okay.
Yes.
What is saving your life right now?
What is saving my life? Honestly, probably coffee right now. Coffee.
Number one
And a lot.
answer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm up to like 5 coffees a day at this point. My
Wow,
husband
that's
jokes that my toxic trait is like before I do any task of any kind, I'm like, oh, I need another coffee, or like I need an iced coffee now because it's like the afternoon. It's just
right.
bad. It's gotten really bad, but yeah, it's been saving my life.
So, what is your coffee choice?
I
What is
love an
your
espresso pod. Like I'm a big like I have the virtual one, and then we have like a Breville Express or something like
Mhm.
that. And my husband loves the Breville and like swears by it and thinks Nespresso is like not nearly as good, but I think Nespresso is great. So
Yeah,
I just have that with hazelnut creamer, and that's like my thing. So
yeah. That's awesome. I told a previous podcast guest that we need to get Starbucks or Nespresso, somebody to sponsor this podcast because
yes.
it is single handedly saving multiple people's lives that we on this podcast.
I've
So,
been begging Nespresso to sponsor me for years. Like I literally will
aw,
every once in a while when I think about it, I'm like, please sponsor me. Like I talk about you. I have
all the
sold all of my friends Nespresso machines, like convinced them to buy them. I'm like, I'm
yeah, they
basically
need
a salesperson for you.
We'll tag them in this episode and tell them to
That'd be
sponsor.
great.
Oh, well, I enjoyed this conversation so much and hearing
I did
all
too.
of the things that you're juggling with being a career woman in the marketing realm and owning being a Christian lady walking into a non-Christian setting and standing firm in who you are, while all the while volunteering at your church, writing books to inspire other ladies. It's all very impressive and inspiring. So, Nicole, thank you for taking the time to talk with us, and we look forward to this episode going live.
Thank you so much. It was such an honor to be a part of your podcast, and I'm just super excited that we got to have this conversation.